Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to sqadia.com. My name is Mohammad Usama, and today we are talking about anatomy, in which we're going to talk about the hip joint. So in this series of lecture, we're going to talk about the bones of the hip joint, the bones that are involved in the composition of the hip joint. We're also going to talk about the structure of the hip joint. We're also going to take a look at the movements, nerve and blood supply of the hip joint, as well as the ligaments of the hip joint and the angles of the hip joint. So in the bones, we are going to talk about the three bones which make up the innominate bones and the femur. And in structure, we're going to talk about specific structural of the segments of the hip joint, such as the concave and convex bony partners which make up the hip joint, which is the acetabulum and the femoral head. We're also going to talk about the acetabular labrum and the joint capsule in that as well. In the movements, we are going to talk about the movements that occur at the hip joint and which muscles are actually responsible for those movements. We're also going to talk about the blood supply and nerve supply of the hip joint. Talking about the ligaments, we're going to take a look at the ligaments of the hip joint, majorly which are responsible for the stability of the hip joint, including the iliofemoral, ischiofemoral and pubofemoral ligaments, their structure and their function. And as well as we're also going to take a look at the accessory ligaments, which is the transverse ligament and the ligamentum teres. At the end, we're going to take a look at the biomechanical aspect of the hip joint, which would compose of the angles of the hip joint, which would compose of both the angles of the acetabulum as well as the angle of the femur, which consist of center edge angle, acetabular anteversion, angle of inclination and angle of torsion. So that's pretty much about the summary of the lecture that we're going to talk about in detail in the upcoming sections. So stay tuned to sqadia.com for more information, and thank you very much.